Well, I've managed to stay in Champion 5 for about 3 weeks. This week I might end in Challenger League, but I've managed to stay in Champion League for about 3 weeks. And so I'm making this video to talk about my experience of being a champion. And basically, right now it's, an inconvenient, frustrating, not fun, unrewarding experience. And I just find myself being, I guess the kind of environment that's being created by being in Champion 5 is one where you're just dumbing yourself down looking for a cheesy win. And I guess, I'll explain or break down how this occurs. Essentially the inconvenience comes in is because in Champion 5, there are so many players who've acquired nearly the full roster of heroes and spent the, resources so they could keep farming, which usually will require a lot of real world money, so they could get all the equipment, all the variety of equipment, because they could build their heroes in whatever kind of way that would, give them the meta cheesy win. And so no matter what, what ends up happening is no matter what defense team you create, there's always a number, or there's always quite a few or a lot of players who can come through and beat your defense team. Because like I just said, they got the whole roster, they farmed up all this gear, and all these players have this capacity to just put something together and just beat your defense team. And so, what ends up happening is you become inconvenienced, because now you're finding yourself coming back routinely throughout the day trying to check your position in Champion 5. Am I about to be demoted? And so you have to constantly be entering in, or fighting opponents just so that way you could keep your victory points. And you have to do this at most within 4 hours every day, so this way you don't lose flags for that day. In other words, you only get 5 flags maximum that you can store. So you don't ever want your flags to stop regenerating, being in a regenerative state. So at most you want to wait 4 hours to come back. So this way you can consume your flags and they could always be regenerating, so you could get the maximum amount of flags per day after you wake up or you come back to play the game for that day. And so that's just a huge convenience, having to constantly dedicate continual attention routinely throughout the day to play Epic 7's, player versus player arena mode. The frustration comes in is that after you decide to take the inconvenience to dedicate yourself to come back to routinely play the game, you don't know how to routinely play the player versus player Epic 7's arena mode. You don't know how the match will play out. And so it's like, even after you put your team comp together and you go to fight a team comp that you feel like you can reliably win against, you still don't know, once you enter the match, you don't know what it is that you're going to face. They could be a little bit faster, they could be a little bit slower, which could break up your team's synergy. They could be equipped with different artifacts that will make them behave a certain way. And then, of course, if you're playing with heroes that have a chance to do something when they attack or when they use a skill, you don't know if that chance is going to pop off when your enemy team or the opponent team heroes attack, or when your opponent heroes attack or use a skill. And so it's like you don't know how it's going to play out. And then you have the RNG of your skills landing. And I guess with this, I'm talking about the unmitigatable 15% effect resistance. And I personally have experience where I have a Brig that I built to 144 effectiveness, and when he launches his S3, it increases the effectiveness of the attack by another 50%. So therefore he has 194% effectiveness. I'm launching it against a Captain Landy, which usually are not built with a lot of effect resistance. They usually just have a lot of, damage stats like attack, crit chance, crit damage with some, damage mitigation such as defense and health. And so there was no one else on that opponent team that would give that Captain Landy a whole bunch of effect resistance. But yet for 3 matches in a row, my Brig with 194% effectiveness on his S3 would not get the dispel. And so what should have been easy, what should have reliably worked, was not working. And so it just becomes frustrating when you go into these matches, and because you can't predict how it's going to go, you just end up losing. And so then it leads into it not being fun or unrewarding. It's because once you actually take the time to figure out, okay, what does it take to beat these teams? Because sometimes it's not always just RNG. It's just your team synergy against what their team synergy is not, it's not properly, let's say, calibrated to defeat that team. So you have to go through this creative and discovery and learning process to figure out, okay, what kind of synergy do I need to create with my team and heroes in order to beat this type of team composition? And so once you go through the creative and discovery and explorative process to figure that out, usually by that time, you've lost more than 2 times. But even though you get the victory, you don't get anything in return. So it just ultimately at the once you get to the end, or once you make it to the place to where, okay, I've gained the understanding, the experience, and the knowledge and the intel I seek in order to be victorious, when you're still going through that unrewarding, like that inconvenience and frustration, the unrewarding of losing, it's like, okay, now it's just not fun anymore. It's like, it's just unrewarding. I get nothing, so it's like, it's like, being in the Charlie and Chocolate Factory, you get nothing, you lose. Good day, sir. And so it's like, once you keep going through that, after you've gained after you gain the battle experience, the knowledge and understanding you need in order to, I know I can win, it's just not happening. That's when it leads into it not being fun and unrewarding. And so ultimately it brings you to a place where you're beginning to dumb yourself down and look for the cheesy win. And so, and what that looks like is, okay, I figured out a team comp that works really reliable against these team comps. So now what I'm going to do is just come to the opponent list. I'm going to take this team comp that I found out works reliable against that team comp. I'm just going to sit here refreshing this list until I find that team comp in the opponent list, and just face that with the team that I put together that can reliably win. And then once you get to that place, or once you succumb to doing that, you're now dumbing yourself down. You're now putting yourself into like a idiocracy where you're just trying to do what's easy. And that, once you get to that place, I think that's like antithetical to what makes Epic 7 a good game. What's the allure to playing Epic 7? The allure to playing Epic 7 is that, okay, they have a plethora of heroes with all these like awesome capabilities. I should be able to, pluck out of here heroes that can work, or at least the ones I have access to that can work, that should allow me to be able to win. And so if I make the investment and to be, to go through the creative discovery and explorative process on how to get these heroes to be like well synergized, I should be able to, garner a victory. And what I've come to realize is that this is true. Without having like the cheesy team comps or cheesy team heroes, I've been able to take the heroes that I have and be able to formulate a way to win. I go through the creative discovery process. I've grown as a PvP player. I've gained the battle experience, the understanding, the knowledge, the intel, and I can secure a victory. And so being able to do that with the heroes you have access to is like the appeal, the draw to someone to come to the game if they're not intending to be a whale. So once you start succumbing to like, well, I'm just going to go for the cheesy win, you're no longer going through the creative and discovery and explorative process, which usually is where the most of the enjoyment and reward for playing the game comes from. And now you're just going for the cheesy win. And now you're not learning how to fight anything new. You're not growing anywhere. And so you're just becoming like stagnant until the meta changes. And then you just go to learn how to find the way to cheesy win, find the cheesy win against that new meta. And, that's not really a place I guess I want to be in a game. That's not really, I would say it's not really interesting. It's not really interesting to go down that path is what I'm saying. And so, that's basically where I'm at in the game. This is the realization I've come to from being a champion or in Champion 5. And so I'm at a point where I'm going to decide if I'm going to just let myself go back to Challenger League. I guess I'm, before, when I was going through the creative and discovery and explorative process, that kind of shielded me or blinded me to the inconvenience and frustration and not fun, unrewarding aspect of, going through the creative and discovery and learning process. And, but now that I've kind of like reached a point where I'm not really like growing as a player, because of how fruitful of the creative and discovery and explorative process was, how much I've grown from that. It's like now it's becoming more pronounced, or it's becoming more of a eyesore or a thorn in my side, of how inconvenient and frustrating and not fun or rewarding it is to still continue to go through the creative learning and discovery process, or to still go through that process of RNG and losing. That it's like, okay, I don't want to deal with that. I want a more casual experience. I want a more relaxed recreational experience. In other words, I want, I have the capacity to play hardcore. In other words, to shape my life around a recreational activity or even a non-recreational activity if I'm trying to gain knowledge or to complete a task. But once I've gained the knowledge I've seeked, or gained the knowledge I seeked, or gained the experience or wisdom or understanding I desired, or accomplished the goal, I no longer want to continue to shape my life around the recreational or non-recreational activity. I want that activity to now be shaped around my life. And so that's where I'm at, with, Epic 7's player versus player arena mode. I wanted to fit into my life now, not the other way around. So that's what's going on. That's where I'm at. I might just let myself drop to Challenger, so this way I can have a casual experience. I was doing what I was doing before. I'm glad to have had this learning experience from being a champion. And it was a great learning experience. It was invaluable. And it's helped me a lot in, Guild Wars. Because now I could take what I've learned. Basically what I've learned was, how to think, how to discern, how to ascertain, how these heroes are being built and what players are trying to accomplish when they put certain heroes make a certain team comp of heroes. So now that I've learned how to think, or to discern this, it's helped me to know how, and taking the time to go through the creative and discovery and explorative process to learn how to beat those teams. I'm finding that I'm more successful in my Guild Wars. So just being able to acquire that kind of knowledge, understanding, experience was invaluable, and I really do appreciate it. And if anything, if I do let myself fall back down to Challenger, that will probably be the most regrettable, most regrettable thing of allowing myself to go back down to Challenger League, is that I won't have access to test my mettle, or to sharpen myself against these, more robust players. But the upside is it'll be a more casual experience. And I guess the key thing is how I've learned to think, to ascertain it, to discern, to not lose that, retain that even in a recreational or more casual play style. If I could retain that, what I've learned, I keep repeating it, but what I've learned, how to think, how to ascertain, how to discern these, like what these teams are, how these heroes are built, and what these players are trying to accomplish when they make these team comps. I've got to retain that and still keep that sharpness of mind when I go into a match, I think I'll be good. But basically, that's all I wanted to say in this video. That's pretty much it. And I guess until the next one.